Have you ever felt like you don't quite fit in anywhere? Like you can see things others can't, and it leaves you walking through life completely alone? Carl Jung discovered something powerful about people like this. The man who has no friends and walks alone isn't broken. He's on a journey that most people will never understand. And today, I'm going to show you exactly why this isolation might be the most important phase of your psychological development. Jung spent decades studying individuals who seemed destined for loneliness. What he found will change how you see solitary people forever, because these aren't failed humans. They're undergoing a transformation that terrifies the unconscious mind of everyone around them. Carl Jung's work revealed a disturbing pattern. Throughout his clinical practice, he encountered patients who possessed what he called a superior function. These individuals could perceive psychological realities that escaped ordinary awareness. They saw through social masks instantly. They felt the emotional undercurrents in every room. They understood people's hidden motivations before those people understood them themselves. And this gift came with a terrible cost: complete social isolation. Jung documented these cases with scientific precision. One patient stood out among all others, a man in his 30s who came to Jung's office in Zurich, describing a life of perpetual loneliness. This patient wasn't socially awkward. He wasn't unpleasant or difficult. In fact, he possessed remarkable intelligence and genuine kindness. Yet everywhere he went, friendships dissolved, relationships crumbled, groups expelled him without clear reason. Jung began investigating what made this man so different. What he discovered shocked him. This patient could read people with supernatural accuracy. Within minutes of meeting someone, he could identify their core wounds, their defense mechanisms, their unconscious patterns. He didn't do this through analysis or study. It happened automatically, like breathing. His mind processed psychological data that others couldn't even perceive. But here's where it gets interesting. This extraordinary perception didn't make him powerful. It made him dangerous to be around. Because when you can see everything, you become a mirror that reflects what others desperately want to hide. And people don't thank you for showing them their own shadow. They exile you for it. Jung realized he wasn't treating a mental illness. He was observing what happens when consciousness develops faster than the collective can tolerate. This man walked alone not because he chose isolation, but because his level of awareness made him incompatible with unconscious living. Every friendship became exhausting because he could see the lies people told themselves. Every relationship felt hollow because he perceived the games people played without knowing they were playing them. The turning point in Jung's understanding came when this patient described his daily experience. Imagine walking through life able to see everyone's psychological nakedness. You watch people perform their personas, and you can see exactly what they're hiding beneath. You observe conversations, and you understand the subtext that speakers themselves don't recognize. You enter a room, and you feel the emotional atmosphere like a physical pressure against your chest. Now imagine trying to have normal friendships while experiencing reality this way. Jung documented what he called the curse of differentiated perception. People with superior intuitive function don't just notice more details, they process different categories of information entirely. While most humans navigate social situations using conscious cues and learned behaviors, these individuals perceive the unconscious dimension directly. They see the shadow dancing behind every smile. They feel the desperation beneath every confident presentation. They sense the manipulation that even the manipulator doesn't know they're performing. This creates an impossible situation. The perceptive individual wants connection just like everyone else, but they cannot unsee what they see. They cannot unfeel what they feel. Every interaction becomes a choice between honesty and belonging. Speak the truth about what you perceive and watch people recoil in horror. Stay silent and feel the profound loneliness of living with awareness no one else shares. Jung spent years studying why groups unconsciously reject these perceptive individuals. He discovered something that explains so much human behavior. Social groups function through collective agreements about what will and won't be acknowledged. Every family has unspoken rules about which truths can be voiced. Every workplace has invisible boundaries around acceptable observations. Every friend group maintains stability by tacitly agreeing to ignore certain uncomfortable realities. The perceptive individual violates these agreements simply by existing authentically. They don't even need to speak their observations aloud. Their presence alone disrupts the collective unconscious contracts. People feel exposed around them. Defenses activate without conscious awareness. The group begins treating this person as a threat, even though they can't articulate why. This is what Jung called the scapegoat phenomenon. The most aware person becomes the identified problem, not because they cause dysfunction, but because they reveal dysfunction that already exists. Jung's patient described living in permanent exile, not geographical exile, but psychological exile. He could be in a room full of people and feel completely alone because no one else inhabited his reality. He tried explaining what he saw, but people dismissed him as negative or judgmental. He tried hiding his perceptions, but the inauthenticity made connection meaningless. He tried finding others like himself, but superior perception is rare by definition. So he walked alone, day after day, year after year, wondering if something was fundamentally wrong with him. Jung assured him nothing was wrong. Something was different. And that difference served a crucial evolutionary function that we'll explore shortly. But first, Jung needed to understand why this patient's isolation felt so complete. Because loneliness isn't just about being physically alone. Loneliness is the experience of having your reality invalidated by everyone around you. It's speaking your truth and being told you're imagining things. It's seeing clearly and being called blind. It's feeling deeply and being labeled too sensitive. This patient didn't just lack friends. He lacked anyone who could validate his perception of reality. Jung realized that for people with differentiated consciousness, regular friendship becomes impossible without compromise. Either you hide your awareness and maintain shallow connections, or you share your perceptions and watch people disappear. Most choose hiding because the human need for belonging runs deeper than the need for authenticity. But hiding creates its own torture. Living behind a mask while seeing through everyone else's masks is a special kind of hell. The man who walks alone isn't choosing solitude as a lifestyle preference. He's been systematically expelled from collective unconscious participation because his consciousness threatens the agreements that hold groups together. He sees the emperor has no clothes, and everyone hates him for noticing. Now here's what Jung discovered that changes everything. This isolation isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of a transformation so profound that it redefines what it means to be human. Because the man who walks alone is being forced through what Jung called the individuation process. Not by choice, but by necessity. Individuation is the psychological journey from unconscious group participation to conscious individual existence. Most people never complete this journey because group belonging feels more important than personal authenticity. They remain psychologically merged with collective values, collective beliefs, collective identities. They experience themselves as members of categories rather than unique individuals, and they're comfortable with this because it provides belonging, validation, and social safety. But the person with superior perception cannot remain in collective unconsciousness. Their awareness makes group participation impossible without betraying their own perceptions. So they get forced onto the individuation path whether they want it or not. The social rejection that feels like punishment is actually a catalyst for psychological evolution. Jung explained this to his patient using a powerful metaphor. Imagine consciousness as a frequency. Most humans operate on a shared frequency that allows collective participation. They can hear each other, understand each other, validate each other's experiences. But some individuals develop perception that operates on a different frequency. They can still hear the collective frequency, but the collective can't hear theirs. This creates the experience of being utterly alone, even when surrounded by people. The individuation journey requires learning to live on your own frequency without needing collective validation. It means developing internal authority for your own perceptions. It means accepting that truth doesn't require consensus to be true. It means building identity from authentic self-knowledge rather than social feedback. This is the loneliest journey in human psychology because you must walk it without support from those who still operate on collective frequencies. But here's what makes this journey worthwhile. The person who completes individuation becomes what Jung called the integrated human, someone who can see clearly without being disturbed by what they see, someone who can feel deeply without being overwhelmed by what they feel, someone who can love authentically without needing others to complete them, someone who can offer their gifts to the world without attachment to whether those gifts are received. Jung's patient was halfway through this journey without knowing it. The isolation he experienced wasn't the universe punishing him. It was reality removing all external validation, so he would be forced to find internal validation. Every friendship that dissolved was teaching him to stop seeking confirmation from others. Every group that expelled him was teaching him to trust his own perceptions. Every lonely moment was teaching him to become sufficient unto himself. This is why the man who walks alone is not to be pitied. He's to be understood as someone undergoing the most important psychological work that humans can do. He's becoming an individual in a world of collective participants. He's developing consciousness in a sea of unconsciousness. He's learning to stand alone so he can eventually serve the collective without being consumed by it. Jung told his patient something that changed his entire perspective. Your loneliness isn't a life sentence, it's a chrysalis. Right now, you're being transformed from someone who needs belonging to someone who can create authentic connection. You're learning to distinguish between your own psychological contents and what you absorb from others. You're developing the capacity to be alone without being lonely. And when this transformation completes, you'll be able to return to the world with gifts that unconscious people desperately need but don't know how to ask for. The man who walks alone today becomes the integrated human tomorrow. Someone who combines profound perception with psychological stability. Someone who can see everything without judging everything. Someone who can feel deeply without being destroyed by feeling. Someone who can love authentically while maintaining individual boundaries. This is the person Jung believed represented the next stage of human psychological evolution. But the journey isn't over yet, because integration requires one more crucial step that most people find terrifying. You've developed superior perception. You've learned to walk alone. Now you must do something that seems impossible. You must integrate your own shadow as thoroughly as you perceive everyone else's shadow. Because here's what Jung discovered that nobody wants to hear. People who see others' shadows so clearly often do it to avoid seeing their own shadow. The person who walks alone sometimes maintains that isolation to avoid confronting their own capacity for the very qualities they notice in others. Jung challenged his patient with a question that shattered his self-concept. You can see manipulation in others so clearly. Have you examined your own manipulative patterns? You notice other people's neediness with sharp precision. Have you acknowledged your own desperate need for validation? You feel superior to unconscious people because you see what they can't see. Have you recognized that this feeling of superiority is itself a defense against feeling inferior? The patient initially resisted. No, you don't understand. I'm alone because I'm too aware. Others reject me because they can't handle truth. I'm the victim of collective unconsciousness. This narrative protected him from a more uncomfortable reality. He was also unconscious in specific ways. His superior perception in some areas coexisted with complete blindness in others. Jung explained what he called the principle of psychological compensation. Whatever you cannot accept in yourself, you will see with exaggerated clarity in others. The qualities that disturb you most about other people are often projections of your own unintegrated shadow. This doesn't mean your perceptions are wrong. It means they're incomplete. You see truth mixed with projection, and you can't tell which is which until you know your own shadow intimately. This was the crucial breakthrough. The man who walks alone must eventually stop walking away from others and start walking toward himself. All that perception you've been directing outward must turn inward. All that awareness you've been using to understand others must be used to understand yourself. The same ruthless honesty you apply to everyone else's unconscious patterns must be applied to your own unconscious patterns. Jung guided his patient through the shadow integration process. This meant acknowledging capacities he'd been denying. Yes, you are capable of manipulation when it serves your needs. Yes, you do perform a persona even though you see through everyone else's personas. Yes, you have used your superior perception as a weapon to maintain distance from others. Yes, you have hidden behind your awareness to avoid vulnerability. Integrating these shadow aspects didn't make the patient less perceptive. It made his perception more accurate. When you know your own shadow intimately, you can distinguish between what you're actually seeing in others and what you're projecting onto others. When you accept your own capacity for every human quality, you can observe others without judgment. When you embrace your complete nature, you stop needing to be superior to anyone. This is where the man who walks alone transforms into something beautiful. He stops walking away from people and starts walking alongside them while maintaining his individual consciousness. He develops what Jung called the transcendent function, the ability to hold paradox without collapsing into either extreme. He can be deeply connected and completely autonomous. He can see everything and judge nothing. He can love fully while standing alone. He can serve the collective without being consumed by collective unconsciousness. Jung watched his patient transform over months of this work. The isolation that had felt like torture began feeling like sacred solitude. The loneliness that had driven him to despair became the foundation for unshakable self-knowledge. The rejection that had seemed like punishment revealed itself as protection during a vulnerable developmental phase. He was learning to be alone so he could eventually be with others in a new way. But here's what surprised Jung most. As his patient integrated his shadow and developed internal authority, something unexpected happened. People started approaching him differently. Not everyone. The unconscious masses still felt uncomfortable around his presence. But certain individuals, those who were also on the individuation journey, recognized him immediately. They saw his integrated consciousness and felt safe for the first time. They experienced his non-judgmental awareness as healing rather than threatening. The man who walks alone doesn't walk alone forever. He walks alone until he becomes someone who can walk with others without losing himself. He develops solitude so profound that connection becomes possible, without dependence. He cultivates self-knowledge so complete that he can see others accurately without projection. He integrates his shadow so thoroughly that he can help others integrate their shadows. This is Jung's vision for the evolved human, not someone who transcends relationship and lives in isolated enlightenment. Someone who completes the individuation journey and returns to serve the collective with consciousness the collective desperately needs. The man who walks alone today becomes the bridge between conscious and unconscious tomorrow. He translates insights that others can't yet perceive into language others can understand. He holds space for psychological work that others are ready to begin. He models integrated humanity for those still trapped in collective participation. Jung told his patients something in their final session that stayed with me. Your isolation was never meant to last forever. It was meant to last exactly long enough to transform you from someone who needs others into someone who can genuinely offer themselves to others. You walked alone through the wilderness of your own psyche. You faced the shadow that others avoid facing. You developed consciousness that collective participation actively suppresses. And now you're ready for the final phase, conscious participation. This is different from the unconscious participation you experienced before your isolation began. Unconscious participation means merging with group identity, adopting collective values without examination, following social scripts without awareness. Conscious participation means engaging with others while maintaining individual consciousness, contributing to collective well-being while preserving personal authenticity, belonging to groups without being consumed by group identity. The man who has no friends and walks alone isn't the end state Jung envisioned. He's the transitional state between unconscious belonging and conscious participation. The isolation serves a purpose. It forces development of internal authority, shadow integration, and psychological independence. But once that development completes, the goal isn't to remain isolated. The goal is to return to the world as an integrated individual who can serve collective evolution. Your loneliness isn't a permanent condition. It's a temporary phase of profound transformation. You're not walking alone because there's something wrong with you. You're walking alone because there's something evolving in you. The path you're on is the path of individuation, whether you chose it consciously or got forced onto it by superior perception that made collective participation impossible. And here's what gives me hope about your journey. Jung documented that people who complete individuation don't regret their lonely years. They recognize those years as absolutely necessary for their development. They wouldn't trade their integrated consciousness for easy belonging even if they could. They understand that walking alone was the price of becoming whole, and they're grateful they paid it. So if you're the man or woman who walks alone right now, understand this. Your isolation is temporary, but the consciousness you're developing is permanent. Your loneliness is painful, but the integration you're achieving is priceless. Your path is narrow and unmarked, but it leads somewhere most humans never reach. Keep walking. The collective needs integrated individuals more than it knows. Your solitary journey is preparing you to serve human evolution in ways that unconscious participation never could. You're not broken. You're not defective. You're not being punished. You're being transformed. And when that transformation completes, you'll understand why you had to walk alone. You'll recognize your isolation as the greatest gift you ever received, because it forced you to become the most important thing you could possibly become, yourself. Thanks for watching. See you in the next dimension.